Our speaker today is Rosabel Young. She is speaking from Pathways Innovative Planning. Project Level 5, moderate a panel discussion. Rosabel's speech today is in two parts. Timer, the first part of the speech is 10 to 15 minutes, and the second part of the speech, which is a question and answer session, is also 10 to 15 minutes. This is Rosabel's last speech for her Distinguished Toastmasters project. She will open the Q&A to any questions about nonprofit fundraising and not just about the panel discussion topic today. She is asking the audience to participate with the question and answer session by thinking of some questions to ask her. With no further delay, Rosabel Young, organizing and moderating an international Zoom art exhibit. Rosabel Young.
Thank you very much for the introduction. The project for Toastmasters is about panel discussions. And the traditional panel discussion has a theme, a moderator, 3 or maybe 4 speakers that talk about the theme, maybe in a debate, presenting pro and con opinions, and then a question and answer session at the end. In my nonprofit, part of the Wentworth Norton group was to have art exhibits at a gallery in Spain, in Barcelona, and another one here at Wentworth Norton in Redlands. It's actually not in the format of a panel discussion at all. Nobody thinks of going to an art gallery like they're going to a panel discussion. You just see pictures hanging on the wall and you walk around, maybe there's an artist there you can meet and maybe you buy something or not. But when COVID hit, we had to get creative and inventive. And what we did was figure out how to adapt an art gallery to what is essentially a panel discussion with a Zoom presentation. It was March of 2020, COVID hit, and we were in the middle of an art exhibit in Barcelona, Spain. In the middle of that month, Cisco called me, and I was here in the United States. Cisco was my moderator who coordinated that art exhibit in Barcelona that month. He said, we have to shut down the gallery. What am I going to do with all these artists and their works of art and so on? And we thought and said, well, you know, there are various meeting venues. Back then it was Microsoft and a few others, and we tried them all and came up with Zoom. By the end of the month, we had taken photographs of the art exhibit items, all the pictures and a couple of sculptures, and invited the artists to come from there to join us from their homes or hotels or wherever they were staying to join us by Zoom. And during that last week of March of 2020, we held our first Zoom art exhibit. It was like a virtual art exhibit, except people got to talk and present their art through Zoom. And then we realized this could be done internationally and people could save on the expenses of traveling. The considerations are, now we did keep going with the Zoom art exhibit events, and even until today. In fact, the last one we had was just this past Saturday, the 14th of January, on Martin Luther King weekend holiday. The considerations are, when you have international participants, it's the local time. We had people from India, from Pakistan, from Africa, from South America, from Mauritius, from Ghana, and of course, a few from the United States and Canada. How do we accommodate these people? So you have to pick a time that's convenient for them. Sometimes they can appear as pre-recorded presentations. We've done that too. And then as our Zoom exhibits grew, and we had 10 and 20 and 30 artists on Zoom, it became awkward to have everybody speak. So we had to select a featured artist or a couple of featured artists to speak, and the others just to exchange ideas briefly at the end, ideas or questions. The most recent exhibit, I'd like to show you a few clips that we just had on January 14th, this past Saturday. And if I'll share my screen, I think I do have sharing. Let's see how. Okay, here we go. Aaron was the moderator, and he presented the theme. And then, because some of the participants were Spanish speaking, I also translated via chat, or sometimes during the speech itself.
Rosabel, are you screen are you sharing your screen?
Yes, you can't see the screen.
I'm not seeing that.
Oh, that's funny. We do have it set so everybody can share.
I
saw
was
the
seeing
screen.
it. It might be something on your system, Bon.
Okay. Well, so the point of that was that we have a moderator present the theme. If different languages are involved, we have to have a means to translate, maybe via chat, and we have to get creative about what's needed by knowing who's participating ahead of time. The next clip is an example of individual artists talking about their specific object of art. And let's see. And now I'm introducing Mario Gutierrez, who's in Barcelona. And when as we go through his speech, he then shares his screen and starts talking about his specific works of art. And then he talks and about different items or different plans that he has for his future exhibits. In some cases, we've had the artists actually show us their studios, which makes it very interesting. In other cases, we've had artists show us while they're painting and zoom in while they're actually painting at their easel, which also makes it very, very interesting and fun. In this case, we have an artist who was politically involved in the wars of Burundi, Rwanda, Uganda, and Burundi in the 1980s between the Hutus and the Tutsis. And the artist was a little shy about showing her face. Later, her husband became a journalist and had his life threatened and so on. But when you have Zoom, you also have that advantage of anonymity. And that's another point. I'm just kind of overseeing, doing an overview of the different advantages of having Zoom and why so many of our artists want to continue appearing on Zoom rather than going back to the live art gallery. This is an example of a speaker who is on, I think I have to stop and then reshare. So let me try this. A speaker who is in Peru, and he is presenting his art and talking about, let me see if it's, well, actually that video isn't playing, but he talks about his art and how he then sends it back to his friends in Peru with the videos that we take on Zoom, which then helps him become more publicized in Peru. So another advantage of the Zoom art exhibit, or so-called panel discussion, if you want to call it that, is that people can then get clips of the videos from the Zoom and use it for their own PR. This is an example of an artist who could not be present, and he is in Cuba. Let me see if I can share that clip. Okay. And his name is Machuti. In Cuba, they have periodic blackouts of the internet throughout the country because of the nature of communism, unfortunately, and the restrictions that they have on the sharing of information both in and out of the country. And so Machuti had a lot of difficulty presenting his art to us. And even though we try to share it, sometimes the video doesn't come through. And at the live presentation, we were able to show it. but sometimes it doesn't work when, or it's set to self-destruct in some way, which is interesting. The other participants who were also absent were an artist from Afghanistan who presented art about the situation of women in Afghanistan and how difficult they have it in terms of their life, and particularly not being allowed to go to school beyond the 6th grade. And even then, what they learn is very limited. They only to basically serving the role of the women as they are defined in their country of Afghanistan. The other clips also that we are from non or absentee participants were from the Ukraine. And in the Ukraine, of course, with the war, they have asked for asylum to other countries. I happen to be watching a program on NHK News of Japan, and that Japan had offered asylum to Ukrainian families, mostly women and children, because the men are fighting. And their art was one of the things that the Japanese community helped, or one way that they helped the children, because of course most of the children didn't speak Japanese, and this made it doubly difficult for them. I'll see if I can share that, since it's just an image file. And it shows how the kids have been traumatized by the presence of war in their childhood. And because of this trauma, they've now, it's affected how they view their families and their world. And instead of drawing toys and happy clowns, they now draw fire and a missile hitting a baby carriage, for example, which is clearly an expression of the trauma they've been through. And this is another advantage of being on Zoom, that you can connect with parts of the world that are themselves disconnected from reality. And that's nice, that in a way that now at the end of the Zoom session with the artists, we then open it up to a discussion with everybody, discussing the nature of art and the role of art in creativity, not necessarily to solve the world's problems per se, but to think about and to promote creativity. In this last clip, if I can share it, I have several participants whom you did not see in the initial clip, because another advantage of the Zoom panel discussion is that people can come and go based on their time availability. If they're in different countries, it may be 6 o'clock in the morning or midnight or 4 a.m. And maybe they can only have a short window of time when they can appear. And so even though we had a total of about 15 participants, we only had about 6 at a time, because they would come and go as they were speaking. This puts a demand on the moderator to be clearly watching who's present and to make sure you have a timeline of who to call at what time, so that the meeting flows smoothly. In some ways, it's easier than a live panel discussion, but in other ways, it also offers more challenges, particularly if you open it up to an international speakers and an international audience. I think probably the most fun part is having the feedback from the artists themselves at the end, and planning future meetings and future themes. For example, in March, it's International Month of Women. April, International Day of the Book and Learning and Schools. May, Motherhood, or it can also be flowers and spring, and so on. And each country has their own way of interpreting these themes, and we have an opportunity to share that. Thank you. Back to you, Madam Toastmaster. Nora, thank you.
Thank you, Rosabel. And now, timer, we want to set the time for the question and answer session for 10 to 15 minutes. And audience, you also can put some of your questions in the chat if you like to ask Rosabel questions, not only about the International Art Festival, but about starting nonprofits. I believe that's what it was, nonprofits. Back to you, Rosabel.
Thank you. Go ahead. Any questions?
One of the questions that I wanted to ask was, are any of the artistic pieces for sale?
Yes. As a nonprofit, we do work with the artist, and that goes to our business model of how the nonprofit interacts with the artist and with the brain injury beneficiary community. And there are several ways. In the live art exhibits, the artist would sell prints and the foundation or our nonprofit would get 20%. Later, even still in the live art gallery, one of the artists said, well, since most people can't afford to buy, a 500 euro print or a 500 euro original, maybe we can make prints and just sell them at 10 or 20 euros, or maybe 30 or 40 if they're framed. And we started doing that. And most of the artists were kind enough to just let us have the 100%, because we would incur the cost of printing and framing. And that way the nonprofit would make money. With the virtual setting, it's actually the same. If they want to contact the artist for an original, of course, we kind of rely on them to be honest about the sale, but they give us permission to make prints and sell them either framed or unframed, and we keep those profits. And that's why the artists are in our group, because in a way, they're donating their art by allowing us to produce free prints, free for them, and then we sell them for the benefit of the nonprofit.
Wow.
Thank you. Good question.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Mona Lisa had her hand up.
And April, but Mona
Okay.
Lisa, please.
Good morning. I think it was very important that you shared with us the challenges. I had no idea, language barrier, custom, asylum, internet, safety, and you were able to overcome all those obstacles, challenges. But I think it's important for us to understand your staff is how many? How many of you on your staff are part of your volunteer work to put this together? Because to me, this was amazing that you were able to deal with all of these challenges and put on a quality art show.
Well, thank you. Yes, the founding members of the group were mostly in Barcelona, but they're not all from Barcelona originally. Mario Gutierrez is one of the newer ones who just joined us this year, and he's from Honduras. And he's now presenting exhibits at the Barcelona Gallery because he moved to Barcelona. After exhibiting there for a few times, he decided he wanted to stay in Barcelona. Vittorio is from Peru, and he helps us connect with other Peruvian artists. In Cuba, it's difficult. We actually have 5 artists, and we were able to connect better with them because one artist, Joandri Cáceres, who was on my founding team and also worked at my Barcelona gallery, went back to Cuba and then was able to again leave Cuba and now lives in Portugal. And because of his connection with Cuba, and he did a mural of the Last Supper for one of the Cuban cities. I don't know if it's called City Hall, but in Cuba, I guess they do have cities and City Hall, but for a major government building. And because of that, he has some flexibility. And even though he lives in Portugal, we made that connection. And he's a young guy. He's not a big political honcho or anything. He's just a young artist. But because of that personality and also the fact that art is seen as non-threatening, he made a connection to Spain and to Portugal. most countries do have diplomatic relations with art, music, and medicine. They don't have diplomatic relations with economics and other things, but art, music, and medicine are like the three open avenues, so to speak. Like I visited Cuba, and I even visited Burma right after it was taken over and became Myanmar because of a medical connection. So if you're in art and music and medicine, you tend to have a little bit of, kind of more easy flowing avenues. But you do have to have a team of people in the different countries, and people who have not necessarily well connected, but who have abilities or natural personality to perform certain tasks. Not just the art, but some of them are good speakers, some of them may be good handyman. Like, for example, Mario Gutierrez actually was a very good handyman, with the hammer and nail type of handyman. And then that's how I got to know him. And then it turned out that he was an artist and he was great. So, and he's, now a permanent member of our group. Aaron, which you all know, is also one of my team. And Bon has worked with him, and he's our webmaster and, an all around kind of internet guy and social media guy. Good question. Thank you, Mona.
Thank you.
And
April
had a question.
Yes.
Good morning. Thank you so much again for a wonderful presentation and taking us around the world. Whenever I hear your presentations, I always, my brain goes crazy. One question that I have, since you were able to help the artists with getting their prints digitally, have any of the artists, or have you considered digital art and the new trend with NFTs and just any of the advantages that can happen with those artists in considering digital art spaces as a way to increase their income revenues?
Yes, actually, we have a digital art or several digital art participants. And at this last one, she wasn't here, but back in September, Lejeunesse, Deborah Lejeunesse from Canada. She's from Montreal, and she does digital art. I don't know anything about it. I'm not an artist. That's why when you get a team together, it's good that they have talents you don't have. I don't know anything about digital art. I don't know anything about art. But it's good I got a team together who knows about that stuff. Thank you, April. Great question. Other questions about nonprofits, fundraising events?
I do have one quick question if I'm unmuted. How you doing, Rosabel?
Yes, Randy, thank you.
I'm gonna lower my hand real quick. Hey, you mentioned some galleries. I studied art when I was a youngster and stopped probably when I was 9, 10 years old. But one of the things I'm curious about in terms of the galleries overseas, we're going to be in Ibiza and Algarve and Lisbon, and you mentioned some areas that I think you said there's a gallery in Barcelona where that young man is at now. Do you have any galleries in any of those areas, Algarve, Ibiza, or in Lisbon?
Well, in Barcelona, I do. That's my own the one I first started in 2016.
Okay.
And well, Joandri has an art gallery in Lisboa, Portugal.
Okay.
And Ibiza, I know that my journalist friend in Zaragoza, Spain, has a friend in Ibiza, and there are many art galleries in Ibiza.
Okay, that'd be great.
It's very expensive to exhibit there, though.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll have to check them out when we're over there.
But yeah, definitely. In fact, in Barcelona, I think there are about 300 art galleries.
Okay. All right. And unfortunately, we're not going to get to Barcelona, but Ibiza. But
Ibiza
sure.
and definitely Lisboa. Joandri Cáceres is there, the Cuban who moved to Portugal.
Awesome. Okay.
So you might run into him. Joandri, Yoandry. Joandri. Any other questions?
Werner has a question.
Yeah, Rosabel, what are the most important things that you're going to be focusing on in the next 12 months that need to be focused upon?
Okay, well, yes, I do have several projects in the burner, so I think, and I'm delegating as much of it as I can. The main focus is to have events ongoing. as I mentioned, we're set for March and April and planning for May and June. And then every September is a Barcelona event because they have a big holiday there. So I piggyback to that one. And I think that it's planning the next event and making sure that you announce it on time, that you get your team together and you delegate the tasks for that event. As to answer your question, which is really short-term goals. Long-term goals would be to have the nonprofit grow, to have more beneficiaries. Right now, most of the beneficiaries, which means the people that we serve or provide help to, are football players, hockey players, people with brain injuries. And I don't have a pediatrician that I'm linked up with, but I do have a lot of questions about ADHD and autism. And I'd like to add a person who can work with me on that. Thank you, Werner. Any more questions, or are we out of time? Yes,
Deborah
Deborah?
has her hand up.
Good morning, Rosabel. How do you determine, do you have a list or an abundance of lists of entrepreneurs or vendors, and how do you determine who do you want to be part of your exhibits? Is there a list that you go by, or a standard list, or is it a word of mouth?
Well, a lot of it is word of mouth. People who know people who are connected, and you observe how they help and see if they're interested in the basic mission of your group or your nonprofit, if that's what you have. People who share your goals and ideals, but at the same time have different talents than you do and different abilities. And you want people who are certain of themselves, not people who are, wishy-washy or who have been jumping around too much. However, I have basically taken on people who were totally raw and misguided or unguided, and found a direction by joining me or looking at something I do, and they decided they wanted to do that part of it. And things that maybe I didn't know, but then they took a little corner and decided, yeah, I like that, I want to develop that. And I think giving those people opportunities is important too. So I think even when you don't expect it, you may have found the right seed for your company to grow further into a direction you hadn't even thought of before. And in fact, speaking of seeds, I have a friend who's in Allentown, Pennsylvania, but he's in Puerto Rico. And he was from a farming family in Puerto Rico, but was one of those kind of half American, half Hispanic, where the identity is kind of mixed up because Puerto Rico became part of the USA and he doesn't know what to consider himself. And he's in a very racist city, which is Allentown. And because he wanted farms, and he didn't even ask me, but that's where his roots were. And I met his parents. And he's going to take over a project of having a co-op farm in Allentown, hopefully involving mixed races and people, because after all, a farm is all about earth, and the earth belongs to all of us. Thank you. Good question.
All right, Susan has a question. And we have a few more minutes, just a few more minutes.
Thank you. Yes, Susan.
Hi, good morning. I was just curious, how are you generating funds?
Well, the sale of the print is one. Grants are others. Grants for brain injury from other, well, mainly from foundations, not from other nonprofits. And also we're trying to get more live event fundraising. And then I do speak at a lot of events, but I never charge. For example, at the rehabilitation centers for elderly and the Epilepsy Foundation. I even spoke to a group of attorneys, and they certainly could have afforded to pay me, but I didn't ask for payment. I spoke to the California Trial Lawyers Association of about 3,000 attorneys about brain injury disability. And I think I'm not of the mindset that I want to get paid for what I do because I'm enjoying it so much. And that's a very good question, Susan. Luckily, I have Aaron and others I'm trying to get on my team that'll start thinking more about how we can make money out of things that we're already doing, but we're just not charging for it. The art that the kids produce, for example, could be sold. And I haven't thought of actually selling it, but we could actually sell the children's art too. Thank you. Good suggestion. And I'll definitely need to follow up on that.
Okay. Thank you, Rosabel. We're now out of time and we're going to move on. So let's give Rosabel an applause for her